Welcome everyone to the Male Ally or Men Tell All panel. I am extremely excited to have these guys here with us. So how we're going to kick things off today is I'm going to give you a little overview of who I am, why we're here, the background of these events, and then introduce the three gentlemen we have here. So hello, my name is Ashley Connell. I am the CEO and founder of Prowess. What we do is we help companies find expert talent. The way we do that is we vet and certify women who are returning to the workforce after caregiving. So when 43% of women leave the workforce to raise their family, when they do, and are out for just 3 years, they lose almost 40% of their compensation power forever. And Prowess wants to change that and help companies really leverage that untapped talent and help women make more money. So that's me. In order to do that, and as you can imagine, one of the missions of Prowess is gender equality in the workforce. And so to do that, what I realized is I was talking to a ton of women about this all the time. Hey, what do you think about gender equality? Hey, what bias are you facing? Hey, what gender discrimination are you seeing? And what I realized is I was in an echo chamber. I was talking to more and more women about it, but I wasn't inviting men into the conversation. And that's when we decided to do these panels. And so what these are is these are three male leaders in our community, and we want to ask them, what are they seeing from a gender equality standpoint in the workforce and at school? Do they feel like they're a male ally? What does male allyship even mean to them? How do they tell their fellow male counterparts, hey, this action is cool, this action isn't? And so in this next 45-ish minutes, we're going to dive into a couple questions that we got from the student audience, which is really exciting. Typically, these are a panel in person, and they are very interactive. And so I'm glad that we got to get your questions in here too. If you have any questions after this, feel free to shoot me an email at Ashley, ASHLEY, @prowessproject.com. And with that, I am going to introduce everyone. So first, if everyone can just give a quick shout out, hey, tell a tiny bit about yourself and why you wanted to be on this panel. So let's first start with you, Walker.
Yeah, so hey everyone, my name's Walker. I graduated from UT about 4 years ago, so 2017, and I've been working at Kendra since then in our e-commerce finance team, and excited about this panel, just coming from a company that is so female dominated and has such a good awareness for women in the workplace and kind of finding that equality. Just kind of wanted to open up that discussion and expose myself to different ideas around male allyship and how that might exist outside of my company, but then also ways that my company can kind of iterate on those challenges and make it a more equitable space. So,
dig it. Thank you, thank you. All right, Tony, let's hear it.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Tony Aguilar. I'm founder, CEO of a company called Chipper. We help people who have student loan debt find the best repayment plan and forgiveness program and help those people chip away their debt faster. You know, what got me excited about this conversation in particular is, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but 2/3 of all student loan debt is held by women. And that gap is increasing every year. And it's for good reason, because more women are going to college than men, graduating at higher rates, going to grad school at higher rates. So now you have more women with more debt. And, you know, being in the startup world, being in the fintech world, like there's not a ton of women in our space yet, right? And I think it doesn't make sense to have, you know, a majority male team building a product that is going to be mostly used, you know, by women. And we're seeing it in our day-to-day. You know, 70% of our users now are women. And so it's just a matter of like, how do we get more women into tech, into the startup world, into fintech? So really excited to be here today.
Oh, that's fantastic. Glad to have you. Abhi.
Hi, yes, thanks for having me. My name is Abhishek. I'm a senior biomedical engineering student at UT. And I think my professional experiences have, kind of been all over the place. I've worked in clinical cancer research as a research assistant. And then I got really involved in the entrepreneurial space. I started consulting for startups at the Austin Technology Incubator as a student associate. I've been doing that for a little bit over a year now. And I also helped found and launch TEDx UT Austin, which is a TED platform on campus. So through kind of my, adventures in the entrepreneurial world and seeing kind of what the ecosystem looks like, I've had the opportunity of seeing a lot of, women-led ecosystems and women-led projects. A lot of the projects all of the projects I've served on are very, diverse in that sense. And so I see kind of this being a really important factor in both success, in impact, and in representation. And so that's what I'm here to talk more about, and looking forward to it.
Fantastic. Got a great group of guys here. I'm excited to have this conversation. So typically there's no things off limits here. So if there is a tricky question, it's okay to say, hey, it's tricky. But really, we just want your unguarded, hey, this is what we're seeing out there, right, wrong, and indifferent. And we kind of joked about this when we were talking earlier, but ideally, this is a safe space where we can all have our questions answered. So with that, I would love to get all of your perspective on rating gender equality in the workforce as it is today. 5 being what inequality? Everything is perfectly fine and perfectly equal. To 1, Handmaid's Tale. Where would you say we are? Let's go, Abhi, first.
That is a definitely a good question. I think from a student perspective, a lot of my professional experiences, yes, I've worked at ATI part-time for the past year and a half, but my true in-depth immersions have been limited to summers and the projects that I've held as a student in a capacity on student organizations and projects in that capacity. And so in that, I'm hopeful because I think a lot of things about my friends and the people that I know in the student body are very aware and discussing these kinds of things, in particular about gender equality. And so I see this huge movement, and I think that will have, some pretty positive ramifications in the future. But in terms of
what's the number? You don't skate away from the number.
I would say a 3.2.
Okay, 3.2. Awesome. Walker, where are we?
Yeah, so equally challenged by the question, but I think we're I get the blessing of not having to go first. So I think I'm somewhere in that low 3 range as well, and hopeful that at least within, to Abhi's point, the that changes that are occurring early on in that cycle of kind of just like that being flywheel of bringing people in and then promoting it and then promoting it again, and that can quickly grow to that 5, and but knowing that at times I've seen it be I've had that feeling of it being 1, 2 kind of, but
let's put a pin in that because I want to hear more examples, but sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, but I think there's a lot of optimism that maybe I'm blinded by my current role and such a great company about it that I do have that kind of, hope, but I'd say 3.5, let's say.
Fantastic. Tony.
I'm glad I really didn't go first. And I, my perspective is a little unique just being in the technology and startup, space. I think it's way lower than the 3 to 3.5 range. And I look at it in two ways. One is like the technology sector as a whole. I think overall we're doing better than we're doing better and better every single year. But I still think we're sub 3. There's just not a ton of representation, especially like in the developer, in the actual like technology, like building technology space, which is super frustrating to see. But I think we're going to continue to improve that over time. And then on the flip side, when you look at like the actual like founders, right? When you actually look at like women-led companies, that's also growing, but we're still nowhere near like where women need to be from a capital raising like standpoint. In fact, like with the pandemic, the percentage of women getting funded has actually dropped during the pandemic. And so that's just a signal to show you that, like we have a lot of work to do. So, given the founder aspect, I would say like, sub 2, when it comes to technology, like a 2 to 3.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this question too. So I would say it's more in the 1 category, not quite Handmaid's Tale, but to put some numbers against what you were saying, Tony, last year, women raised, I think it was 2.7% of all capital. And this year, you're right, it's going backwards. And women, gender equality as a whole is now scooting backwards 10 years because of COVID. So this conversation is a good one to be had. It's going to be people like these 3 guys right here who really help us push it forward. So, all right, next question. What does it mean to you to be a male ally?
I can take that one. I guess being on the alumni advisory board for the Well Institute, kind of been thinking about that kind of unique spot that I'm in to expose myself to the challenges of that might be confronted by other people in the workplace that I'm just kind of blind to. And I think that first step, if I could break it out a little bit, would be kind of doing the hard listening at first. And I don't think that step ever stops, but at least like to find where my voice as an ally can be valuable, I think requires that like long phase of listening and understanding the challenges. Like even being allies, being on this panel and trying to think through, like, oh, there's people who are thinking it's a 3 and 3.5, and people who are seeing it as a 1, and that's being kind of appraised and understand those different interpretations of success and failure of gender equality advancement. I think just like being a part of that conversation and trying to listen as much as you can. I definitely view that as kind of where we can bring the most value and opportunity.
Fantastic. So if I heard you correctly, it's being that listening ear and participating in things like this.
Yeah, and then taking that into the conversation. So that I guess that taking that back into the conversations around it, to be that educated voice.
Love it. Love it. Abhi, what do you think?
Yeah, no, this is a great question, and it's making me think back to some of the things that we've discussed earlier. Like Walker, I'm the only male on the student advisory board for the Kendra Scott Well Institute, and I think that taught me an important lesson in that what I feel like the most powerful thing the most impactful thing I can do as a male ally is be an advocate to have women in the room. And I think that means, we see in the workplace or on these teams where males talk about, this is a safe space to share your ideas, to contribute kind of what your visions are for this project or for this team or whatnot. But that truly doesn't come out unless you have other people in the room who you can relate to, who you can, really speak to and empathize with and share perspective with. And so I think as a male advocate or as a male ally, that means for me to ensure as much as I can to share resources and opportunities to bring female and women perspectives into the room. However that may be, I think that's a primary overarching objective.
Yes, absolutely. Love it. Awesome. Tony, what do you think?
Yeah, so came up with a couple things. I think the first thing is actually, really, really talking about it. So I think everybody, if you believe it, right? I feel like there's still some people who don't believe that there's actually this issue, which blows my mind. But one is, it's actually like voicing it out and sharing, when you hear something, when you hear a stat, or when you hear of an instance of something like that taking place, and condemning it, right? So I think one is just like actually, sharing this information. But I think more importantly, at least for my situation as a leader of a company, is to really understand why it's happening, right? Why, like this is real, but like what caused, this situation to be here? How long has it been going on? Like what are the trends that we're seeing? Like where is it shifting? And just get a better understanding of like, what's the root cause here, so that you can, through your organizations, see where it may be happening, so you can, maybe pick up on some cues that are there.
I love that. Ask why. That's so good. That's really good.
And I think there's little simple things too that just show, like for example, like I won't join any panel or be part of any talk if I go look at the conference and I just see all dudes, right? Or if they ask me to be on a panel and I'm going to be the only, like, it's all males. I'm like, absolutely not, right? So I think there's just little tweaks that you can do, like, to your normal life of, just calling stuff out like that, right? And by saying, hey guys, I'd participate, but we need more diversity, like on this panel, that gets the people on the other side to kind of think about it. It's like, okay, we need to be more diverse, right? So you're not calling them out or anything, but you're kind of just showcasing like, hey, this is an issue and we're not representing like the community, correctly if we don't get women like on this panel.
I love it. I love it. I love it. And it makes perfect sense back to what you were saying before with your audience with Chipper. I mean, if that's who is used, if women are the people who are using it, yeah, you absolutely want to get those voices in. Love it. Love it. Love it. All right. Next question. Where specifically do you see inequities in the workplace? And you can either give a hypothetical or an example of one that you've seen, and how has it been resolved, if it has been resolved at all. And this is a question from the student audience. I'll give some time for y'all to think about this.
I mean, there's one instance, and I don't think I can share.
You could be general.
Yeah. No. Well, so there was a situation with a dear friend who, she was an executive, or pretty high up at a super fast growing startup in fintech space. And hearing her story and now seeing like what's happened in the news, like they actually so their CEO would just treat her so differently, like inside like the boardrooms, or like in those executive team meetings, and just the way that he would kind of just like talk down to her. And I don't think he had a real understanding of like that he was actually doing it, right? And it was something that she finally, after a couple of months, like brought up, and they just kind of brushed it off. Like she brought it to HR, and it created this whole ordeal. And because she ended up like bringing it up to HR and like causing like a scene about it, she ended up getting pushed out of the company, which was very, very sad to see. But on the flip side, she ended up filing a lawsuit against the company, which has been very, very public now, like recently. And, that just puts an entire stigma like on that organization going forward. Like nobody, with a good heart or with good values is ever going to want to work there, like, ever again. And so it just, and the whole time, like you're hanging out with her, you're talking to her, and you have no idea this stuff is happening behind the scenes, like at work, right? And all the stress is like building up. And finally, when it happened and it just all came out, like you could tell, like, how much of an emotional toll it can take on somebody.
Wow. And I think you nailed it at the beginning. When we're seeing this on TV, we see what's the Apple TV show, the morning news or something like this. And
yeah.
The Fox one too, the movie, again, can't think of the name of it, but it feels so far away until you know someone who is in it, living it, breathing it, and then you see how it all.
And with her case too, it's like no one else would bring it up, right? But finally, when it became public, then there was a storm internally where then more women were starting to like share their voice, right? And so it's like, you have no idea like how deep it could go. And, once it comes out in news or once somebody like actually shares it, then everybody else like feels like they have a voice now and they can speak out against it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great example. Anyone else?
Yeah, I can speak here. I think two things come to mind here. One is kind of a more specific circumstance, or example, and another one is kind of a general kind of sentiment that I think society has, and that kind of challenges women empowerment. The first one is kind of in a team setting. I think one of the challenges is really allowing women to have ownership over some aspect of the project, and that means complete ownership. I think I've seen examples where you think someone thinks that they're allowing true freedom, true creative freedom, true executive freedom in a decision-making capacity for a woman on the team, but then when it comes down to presenting it somewhere or like thinking of the next steps in that project, their perspective suddenly becomes diminished to a point that that it just doesn't line up, and so I think having that active cognizance of like, this is your function on the team and you are entirely responsible for this, and you have your autonomy in making executive decisions in this area, in delivering the presentations to the stakeholders in this area, and truly seeing through kind of the work that you're putting in. I think that's an important thing to recognize. And the second thing, it kind of loops back to what Tony was saying earlier about asking the why of what some of these happen. I think for me, having been surrounded by diverse teams growing up, I was a bit privileged in the sense that I've seen the world in a kind of a diverse way. But so then when things come up where, there are these blatant examples of kind of sexism or gender inequality, I almost have to take a minute to like actually believe that happened. Because in my status quo and the way I approach the world and the way that I like to conduct myself on teams, that is so far out of my realm of possibility that like that having happened is almost like unbelievable for me. And that is like when I mentioned the 3.2 at the beginning, and Tony and you actually shared, these statistics. I'm like, oh crap. and so asking that why, and really like, I think you feel like as a male, you're like, I can't believe like another male did this, or behaved in this kind of really unacceptable way. But coming to terms with that and acknowledging that, I think even as someone who is an advocate, that exists and that there are, those instances occur, is an equally fundamental and important aspect of being a male ally. And also, these situations that arise.
Well, you bring up so many great points there. So, first and foremost, this is not in any way a male bashing panel, right? And so much so that I want to give an example that just happened this past week, like of a time where women were not given the ownership and the full freedom. So obviously we talk to employers who are looking for diverse candidates. Right now, it's all women. So they call us and talk us through who they're looking for. And one of the questions that we ask are, talk to us about the intangibles that you want this person to have. Like, we get it. Okay. Yeah, they're organized. Got it. Yeah. Okay. But like, talk to me about who these people are. And the woman on the phone who was hiring this other woman said, my worry about hiring another woman is she most likely will need a Prince Charming because women don't take ownership like men do. And this was to me on the phone, and this isn't a man, this is a woman. And you know, the way she said it sounded really harsh. And then I helped her break it down of what she was saying. And she was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. That's not what I meant at all. I totally see how it came off like that. And it just shows how ingrained this bias is in our lives. And so I wanted to give that example because this is a two-way street. And we do have a lot of work to do. So great points. Anything else, or want to hop over to the next question?
I'd say one instance that I hear about a lot coming from a lot of my coworkers who are like, they're at Kendra Scott now, but they're coming from
other places.
Let's say another company that might have done it a little bit differently. And they're talking about maternity leave, I think, is one of the big ones that I hear a lot of. Just like kind of that ever-present fear that, like my, well-deserved and well-needed break from the work to care for a child in early life is going to be kind of a death sentence for my, progress track within this company. I hear a lot about coming from, let's say a banking world in New York or something that might be a more traditionally male environment, and just multiple instances of people getting had in different ways of like, this person started 3 years later and is now getting promoted in spite of me, but it's, any one of those could have been the right move for the company. But when you hear it so frequently, it makes you think that it's probably not in a specific instance, but a real problem in the system.
Now,
yeah.
You are spot on there. And one of the number one ways to help with gender equality in the workforce is for males to take paternity leave and take the full amount. And that's hard. Don't get me wrong. And like that's new for many men to do that. But that's one of the top ways. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah. And I just feel also, I think with the pandemic, you're seeing, especially with the work from home aspect, traditionally, women are picking up more of the slack at home with the teaching and everything. Like, I'm just curious, Ashley, do you feel like that's going to be another, like, is it going to impact, most women that are like working from home, doing the school from home? Like, I just feel it may be like another, step back because of this pandemic.
It's a massive step back. So today, 30% of working mothers are considering leaving the workforce. Just last month, almost 900,000 of them did. Last month alone. And
too much. Yeah.
Again, when I was saying before how much it's pushing us back, that is a huge reason why. So again, any support that you can give women, and I love, I think Abhi, I think it was you saying like just bringing them into the room, I love that saying, like, I'm going to show up with my folding chair if you don't invite me to the room or to the table, because I need to be there. So I think that is really, really important. And the more we talk about this and how scary it is and the massive economic toll that takes. So when you're seeing a lack of diversity in leadership specifically, that is $150 billion loss in profit for Fortune 500 companies alone.
Wow.
And so it's needed. And so again, thank you to the three of y'all for being here and having this conversation. Okay, next question. Oh, this is a great one. Do you think that inequity in the workplace related to gender is recognized by most men? Or do you think that they're typically unaware of it until it's brought to their attention? I'll let whoever wants to jump in. Yeah, perfect.
I mean, I really think it's a matter of what industry you're in, right? Yeah, this is a tough one. Yeah, let me think on it for a sec.
Sure.
I mean, one particular challenge, I guess, to be kind of stemming from that maternity leave comment is it's almost not to a male's, if you want to think of yourselves highly as like, I'm getting promoted because of skill, or like I'm getting advancing in this company because of, factors that are independent of my control, gender being one of them. Of like, I want to be recognized as an individual, not as a man. It's almost to your advantage to not think that there is some sort of macro tailwind that's helping you out in the world, which is I don't know if this is the case within males in the workplace, but just like to think that there's something helping you beyond your control is one of those things. It's like, why would I try to recognize that unless it's like really brought up and consciously engaged with? I don't want to say it's not you, but it's, there are pieces that are out of your control, hard pill to swallow, but I think like making sure that is talked about. Yeah.
I think you nailed it. And I think that it's really important that we do talk about, because what I'm hearing you say is bias, right? And you're unconscious of it. You don't know it exists because you're not subject to it. And I think, Walker, you're exactly right that you can't really know until it's brought up to you. And I think that that's okay. It is what I'm excited to tell you guys is like, it's okay to not know it exists. But then once you are brought to attention, I think that's when it's like, oh, now I need to do something about it.
Yeah. And I feel like there's a lot of industries, I came from the finance world before getting into technology. And that's also like, if you're on Wall Street, it's very, like that's one of the most male dominated, industries, in the country. And so, I think, most people understand that there is inequality in the workforce, but if you're like you mentioned, like if you don't see it, you don't really know how bad it is, or like if it's there. And when you're in such a male dominated industry, it's hard for you to believe that you can actually change it or do something about it. If you're not like hiring people, if you're not like building a team, if you're not, in a true like decision-making, like, status, like it's hard for you to like feel like you can have an impact and actually change something in your workforce. But in technology, in finance, I grew up in West Texas, oil and gas, like it's completely male dominated. And, I think most people in those industries may not know how bad it actually is.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think one thing that stuck out to me here is that bias that Walker was talking about, and that dissociation kind of between personal input and what progression or upwards mobility might look like in the workforce. And I think, like, to answer your question, Ashley, about like recognizing inequality in the workplace and like men recognizing inequality, I think there is a spectrum. And like, my WE friends, they go into tech jobs and it's a completely different world than my textiles and fashion friends who, go into this kind of creative space. And so sometimes there are those instigating kind of situations that really lead people to take a double look at like, whoa, this is not okay. Like, and they have kind of their perspective shifted because of some kind of event. And then there are others where, like coding jobs where it's just so blatant. You're like, you come to it kind of being very aware of it. or more aware of it than in some other instances. And I said, having conversations like these often and visibly amongst people, I think, are a really important step in kind of ubiquitizing kind of that discussion.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I think about my career quite a bit when it comes to these type of things. And I feel like one of the jobs I had, it was like death by paper cut type thing. It wasn't anything big that happened, but it was a ton of tiny things. Like, for example, I was in marketing, but I supported the sales team. So sometimes I would go on these sales calls. Well, I was selling technology or helping them sell technology. And so the meetings would be on the golf course. I don't play golf. And then after the golf course, they would go to a cigar bar. I don't smoke cigars. And again, nothing wrong with that, but it just wasn't super inclusive. And then I didn't want to go, but I knew that deals get done, like they say, on the golf course. And so it's just like little things like that sometimes, of course, you're not going to, you may not think about it, but then when you do, it's important next step to be, okay, well, instead of golfing, maybe we do something that everyone can do, like putt-putt even would have been better, But so to your point, the spectrum is really key. All right, next question. How do you communicate with other men in the workplace or school about supporting women? And what does this conversation look like? And have you found it being successful or not? I'll give some time for y'all to think.
Yeah, I can hop in here.
Perfect.
I think, and I might be stealing a little bit of Tony's thunder here, but speaking with like a lot of friends in the tech space, it's I work in fashion, very different world. But when my friends, when I chat about that with, I guess what would be more like high technical skill jobs would be like a coder developer, maybe finance would fall in that bucket, but it's just like, oh, the pipeline is dry, and like if it is, let's say I've got a startup and that same talent that Google's also looking for. I mean, this is just a constant retorting. Yeah. Google's also looking for a female developer, and if they can make 50% more and have stability, it's like they don't want to work with a startup. And so like, but understanding what's a reality there of like, oh, we've cleaned it out, we need more women in STEM, like that's a macro 20-year long flywheel that needs to be built up. But what are the realistic changes that can occur? It kind of like stops there because that's where the conversation ends, is I don't know, oh, is that a reality that they're confronting? Is that just something that their bias always tells them is going to be a problem, is like, oh, we're running out of talent, there's no talent available. It's like, it's probably somewhere in between, but it can't, I mean, it is such a cop-out, it kind of tends to stop the conversation there.
Absolutely. And that makes me laugh because that's what I do, right? Is I help companies find female talent. And so the whole pipeline thing just always makes me laugh. Yeah. But it exists. If it didn't exist, we wouldn't be in business. The thinking that there is no pipeline.
And there has to be a grain of truth to it, but it's like what reality is there actually a problem?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we, I think Ashley and I were on a panel a couple of weeks back talking about just being a founder, and one of the most important things is having a network of other founders you can talk to. And so as that situation that I brought up came up, that was a mutual friend between a lot of us. And so we kind of talked about those things. And through those conversations, especially with like female founders, getting their perspective on like little things that I had no idea that I was doing that, would just like kind of make me wake up a little bit. Like, for example, when we were going to plan like somebody's party or, like a birthday party or something, I like, didn't think of it, just went to one of like the ladies, say, hey, do you want to be like the head of our party planning committee? Thinking I was like, that is just a group for like women. And I realized, I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't realize I did stuff like that, but it was like an assumption that I just naturally made. And yeah, I don't know. It's just like when those issues come up, it's having conversations with, like the people around you, like, and bringing it up, and don't just, just kind of like, shoving it under the rug. It's like actually bringing it up and like having a conversation about it. And that's just, with those founder discussions, that's really like the only time that I've, kind of brought it up with my colleagues.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I hear that a lot, actually. And I've heard it before, where it's like, oh, she can plan the party, and I'm happy to plan the party. It's just, I totally get what you're saying. But again, I think that the one thing that we really want to take care, it's not the making the mistake, it's the making the mistake and then acknowledging it and never doing anything about it. Like the fact that you are sharing that's very vulnerable, and like, hey, I messed up and now I'm never going to do it again. And I think that that's really great.
Actually, could you repeat the question real quick? I've been doing something and I just want to confirm it.
Absolutely. How do you communicate with other men in the workplace or school about supporting women, and what does that conversation look like, and is it typically successful?
Yeah, so as Walker and Tony have been talking, I've been thinking about this, and this is one of the first times I think I've thought about this very explicitly. Like this kind of a pointed question has never been asked, at least to me, from other people. And one of my first reaction was, I'm not doing it. Frankly, like I'm not doing enough of that. That was my initial kind of knee-jerk reaction. And I realized that, like I do my best to advocate and to extend opportunities that I see are needed, like if I see a role, or if I see, kind of a project position or something like that, connecting it with women that I know who are extremely qualified for those things, or who may be able to take advantage of it with the startups that they're leading, or the projects that they're piloting and things like that. That is one way I do it. But I hadn't thought about kind of having those conversations with other males as well, and like what they do, and very kind of point blank asking that question. And so I think what I'm starting to feel now is, for me, it almost seems equally as hard, or if not harder, to open those conversations with other men about women empowerment, as it is to ask female founders about how can I support you, or what biases are you noticing that I'm doing. And so I'm curious to see like where that goes. But I think, these questions, if anything, for these panel questions, I would implore, like, this is something that I'll reflect back on. And I also implore like any guys watching this to ask themselves these questions, because I think they've been making, also been pushing my kind of envelope in what I know to be true.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah, Abhi, as you were saying that, like what I realized was when I end up having those conversations, it's because something bad has happened, or like that has caused like that conversation to get started, right? And I never realized that. Even like, I've been in meetings where one of our teammates, said something, that some women could find offensive, and then it's like, got to take them to the side and say, hey, I don't know if anybody found it offensive, but some could, and here's why, and kind of walking them through, like that scenario. But I don't think I've ever been proactive in like, wanting to have those conversations, right? It's because something like kind of like sparked it, which, I never realized, before now. So Abhi, thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah.
But that's really interesting. Like, I would love to get some insight from other people who are proactive about talking about it, and like, what are they doing? How do they do it? Like, what kind of questions do they ask? to kind of get those conversations going.
So like I said, I've done a couple of these panels before, and I've asked a similar question. And one of the best answers that I've heard, well, a few things. First, typically in bigger companies, I don't know about smaller companies, there are what's called ERGs, employer resource groups, and typically that's like a women's group or a parents group or a Black group or whatever it is. And I was talking to one male who says he attends those regularly because he's like, hey, I am employing many women. I need to be going to those meetings and understanding what they're saying, what their problems are, and how I can help. So I think there's that. And then also there's a huge difference, in my opinion, between being a mentor and being a sponsor. And we haven't really touched on what a mentor is in this conversation. So just quickly, someone who is taking extra, or how do we want to say this? Helping someone else grow throughout their career is a simple way to say a mentor. The difference between that and a sponsor is someone who typically opens doors. So there's a saying that is, your manager talks at you, your mentor talks with you, your sponsor talks for you. And so in the rooms that you're not in, the sponsor is the person speaking on your behalf. And I think that is a really great thing for men to do, specifically for women in the workforce.
Well, I think another thing that comes to mind when, you brought up employee research or ERGs, and being with the Well Institute, I see kind of this polarity in, like, you have these rooms where it's a lot of males, and then you have these groups that are female empowerment, but it's a lot of females. And I think the best conversations, maybe the hardest conversations, is when you have equal amount of those populations in the same room. Yeah. And so even like these female empowerment movements and things like that need males in the room to an equal extent that male workplace environments, and executive positions need females in the room. And that I think is an interesting kind of duality, how that kind of harmonious kind of balance works out, and how you achieve that in productive ways, I think is an important thing, something that I'm considering right now as we speak.
I love it.
Yeah, some of that, I feel like some of the areas of grievances are hashing out of the, some of those stories. It's like maybe that needs to be a more, maybe exclusively women group to kind of have those conversations, but then like to evolve that conversation and then take it to that next level, or to kind of bring in those, sponsors,
right,
who are going to kind of advocate on behalf of gender equality, I think would be, but I do think that there's probably a point where it's like, you want to have an exclusive group that wants to have a conversation and doesn't want the male perspective all the time. I could see that.
That's a great point. And that's interesting. I wonder, I guess that there would need to be some sort of rule or discussion beforehand on how they wanted to break that out. That's a great point. So, All right. Well, second to last question. Are there any specific gender equality policies, stances, or just general values that you have stood up for in your lifetime? And if you how, if you have not, what would they be? Or why are you going to do that differently now? Give you time to think. These students are asking some heavy questions. Yeah. Okay, ladies.
Besides, like, the way I voted this election, like, yeah, you got to think about it.
I think I've got one that, and it kind of comes back to, I don't know, something I mentioned earlier of, men not wanting to acknowledge the tailwinds of that have been afforded to them. I think for maybe, and I've had this conversation with my mom around, she's very successful in her work, and I think to acknowledge those gender challenges, I've found in a couple ways, like, there are times where it feels like, okay, it's devaluing how hard she has worked if she starts advocating for gender equality. Is I got to this point almost in spite of those challenges. Why can't that occur, forever down the chain? And to acknowledge that it doesn't rewrite your narrative to go back and say, hey, I did experience these challenges and I want to maybe make it so that no one else has to experience that again. But that's a hard thing to grapple with, is like, I don't want to acknowledge I got here because I'm a woman. It's in spite of being a woman. If she's, later in the career, it's like, okay, yeah, I did experience those headwinds. And so that's just something I've been kind of trying to talk through with her as well, is like, how does that older perspective on, like, those are some of the most powerful voices that you could empower in the movement, and in just like seeking that change, but like to recruit them, but then also not feel like they're having to change how they kind of view themselves as a fighter. And
I love this, and I think about this all the time. I mean, there's so many websites and books and tchotchkes that are like girl boss, but there's none that say boy boss. Like, why? But Walker, this is exactly what you're saying. It's like, I understand that if I'm someone who, if I'm a woman and I went through and I paved the way and I did the hard work and I dealt with all the bullshit, I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say all the stuff. I don't want someone to look back on it and be like, well, yeah, because she's a woman. Yeah. Huh.
Yeah. like everything, but
interesting. That's a great point. Great point.
But
yeah. And I'll say from
voices, it could be a value. Sorry, Tony, go for it.
No, go ahead. Continue.
That was
awesome. Yeah. No, for me, so it's twofold. One is in the professional world. So we raised capital for my previous startup through K4 Capital. And if you take, so I love Mitch Kapoor, I love like their fund, but if you end up taking capital from K4, like they have a founder's commitment that you sign as a founder. And it's, the acronym is GIVE. I forget the exact like words, but all of your goals need to have a diversity and inclusion aspect to them. So as you're growing, the amount of people that you're interviewing, the amount of people that you're bringing on, like, each quarter, each year, and these are metrics that you're tracking as an organization. And so I never thought it was possible to like have a quota of people that, you need to bring on, but, you don't want to just check off the box, say, okay, we interviewed 10 women or, 5 Hispanics and 5 Black people. Right. But it just makes you more conscious on like your organization and like, and what you're building. So there's no set quotas, but it, you know, it's like, okay, what, you know, do you have like a diverse like organization? Another part of it is trainings or education. And so are you investing time and resources, you know, with your team on, you know, some of the issues that could be happening like right now? And also they provide training and education to all of the portfolio companies, right, that we could provide to all of our employees, right? And so how do you deal with somebody, you know, like most recent, like a racial situation in the workforce, right? Like that was prevalent on everybody's mind. So, you know, it's, you know, and there are women, you know, training sessions as well. And then the last one is, it is the V part is the volunteer part. So what are some, you know, communities, you know, that, you know, are under resourced, underprivileged that you as a team, as a company could start giving back for, right? And I know this doesn't like hit directly to like women specifically, but I think if you have a culture as an organization that thinks about those things, it's more likely you're going to have a very diverse like workforce, right? And so it kind of just gets you in the habit of kind of really looking at your you know, your team, your organization, and like how are you growing, you know, like is it represented across the board, you know, genders, you know, sexual orientation, you know, like whatever. And so you know, that was my first, you know, kind of taste of, you know, putting that into an organization. And then now as a father, I have a 7-year-old daughter, and you know, it's you know, I wanted her to, you know, as a founder, being in the tech space, like I want her to be involved in like science and technology and all that stuff, right? And it made me so angry to find out like all the toys, you know, like even if we go to McDonald's or somewhere, they're like boy or girl. I'm like, what does it matter? Like why, you know, like why do we have to say that, you know, like, but even like toy selection, clothes, like all of that stuff just opened my eyes to like how they put, you know, the genders in complete different pockets, right? And so for most little girls, like they don't even like, you know, get introduced to technology through like the toys that, you know, are advertised on TV or like through YouTube and stuff. And it really, really drives me crazy. And so for me, just being very conscious on like, you know, opening, you know, her eyes to like what's out there, right? You know, and take the gender and colors like out of it.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Fantastic. Yes. All right. Anything else before our final question? Okay, we have talked. Oh, do you have something?
I was mainly like, I think a lot of the things that came to my mind, Walker and Tony said very, very eloquently. But I just wanted to say that like employing kind of structured ways to live out these principles and live out these things that we believe in, I think is like much harder than I think just advocating for them or just talking about them. And I think that's like an action speaks louder than 100 words or what have you. But if you are in positions where you're putting together teams or you're assembling projects, I think that's a perspective that I am most familiar with from my experiences as a student. Employing that awareness and that cognizance is really fundamental.
Oh, I love it. You guys, this is so great. Y'all are making this easy for me. Okay, last question. In the past hour-ish that we have been talking, what has been your biggest aha moment, and what are you going to do to move that forward or better the world tomorrow? What is that action you're going to take because of that aha and what you're going to go do?
I mean, so the first thing for me is to pull all of our female employees and have a conversation. You know, the whole pandemic has been, you know, we were all in the same office. Now we're all virtual. You know, I don't see everything that's happening day to day. I don't see all the Slack, you know, conversations or Zoom meetings going on, right? And so I don't have a lot of the visibility and transparency that we had before. So for me, it's just talking to our team and getting an understanding of like, how are things going, and, you know, what could we be improving on, right? Like what, you know, are there situations or are there, meetings or, scenarios where you guys feel uncomfortable, or, like what could we be doing differently? And then also thinking about maybe, changing a little bit of our benefits or our time off process because of women who have kids who are doing homeschooling. Like I have my kid here with my wife as well, and she takes the bulk of it, right? But maybe there's some things that we could be changing to just, relieve some of the stress and tension, of some of our teammates. So I'm so glad we had this conversation.
And if you need more ideas on that, you know where to go.
Thank you.
Yes.
I think building on that, I think this conversation is an aha moment in itself. But for me, I think there have been instances, throughout my life where I was at a friend's house and, I had a conversation with his mom and she was talking about how her career went on hold for the husband, and this is something like they have a very, to me, in my eyes, like a very beautiful relationship. They really love each other. They really work with each other. And then for her to, bring this to light, I think that really, like, behind the scenes, a lot of this exists much, to an extent, much greater than may be visible. And so my real, I had instances like that sprinkled throughout my life, but the real aha moment for me, and it shouldn't have been this way, but like I'm glad it happened now than later, was when I joined the Well Institute as an advisory board member. And as the only male member on this team of women, even in this space of inclusivity that's, built on these principles of inclusivity and diversity and inclusion, I kind of, the tables were a little bit turned, and I felt kind of some of the things and like what it feels like to be in an environment where you may be the only male in the room or the only female in the room. And I think that is honestly kind of sad. I think it's sad because it took that much to be, and it took that event to be like as hard an aha moment as, over all the other instances in my life where I could have had those aha moments. But I'm really glad it did, because I think that makes me more open and kind of active in a way. I think, throughout life, you can take on kind of a latent role, or, I promote diversity and inclusion, like in your day-to-day, you live by those values, and in kind of the micro actions that you take. But then transitioning from that to an active position and pushing the things like you said in this question, I think there's a switch, an internal switch that you have to activate, because it takes more drive and it takes more, I think, conviction on your end, more conversations on your end. And that's I'm looking forward to the future in that sense, in that regard, and continuing these kinds of events and conversations.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. All right, Walker, round us out.
Oh, I was on mute. So I think probably the biggest takeaway for me, and just been listening over the past little bit, I don't know, I generally tend to say, okay, like I can kind of terminate this listening phase, and like at some point I can just turn into action. Like, you can stop listening, I've got all the information I need, and next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out and be this advocate. But to something Abhi was saying, it's just maybe easier on me, but then harder to build up that activation energy to do, is just why not bring the voice in the room and to say, like, okay, instead of me being this like listen, sounding board, kind of regurgitate and try to capture the emotion and the challenge and the nuance of that point of view, it's maybe just extend that invite and to expose different people to voices that are willing to engage and want to communicate challenges, opportunities, how they're seeing the space, and so to kind of open that up to, primarily male friend group, let's say, of just like okay, people are willing to have these conversations. I don't think it's an absence of wanting to acknowledge it. It's just easier not to have to. And so, okay, let's just open that door and say, kind of now's the time to start the dialogue. And it might be a little tough at first, but I think you do it 3-4 times and just kind of the ball gets rolling. So,
you guys, this was fantastic. Thank you all for joining in this. I keep saying fantastic because it was panel. It was just exactly what I wanted to hear. Y'all are doing great things in your lives, and I'm sure everyone here watching this is going to give you a standing ovation for how honest and vulnerable and proactive y'all have been and will continue to. So thank you so much, everyone watching, listening. Thank you. You can reach out to me again, Prowess Project, and I'm sure you can reach out to these guys too. If y'all have any parting words, I will let y'all have it, and then we'll wrap this up.
Thank you for taking the time to bring our voices out, and hopefully people learn something interesting or have an interesting thought coming out of this. So I appreciate it.
Love it.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity. Lot to think about right now. This was pretty awesome. So thank you, Ashley. Really appreciate it.
Good.
Same. Thank you, Ashley. If there's anything in my background or anything that I've spoken about that anyone wants to connect with me about, I'm more than willing to share kind of my experiences in those more specifically. But a lot to think about.
Well, y'all get thinking, and everyone else, enjoy the rest of your day. We're so glad you tuned in. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.